Welcome to Unsheltered Conversations, HomeAid America's podcast where we explore stories of homelessness, hope, and the change we can build together. I'm Scott Larson. Today, I'm honored to speak with my good friend, Brian Peterson, an artist, community builder, and the visionary behind Faces of Santa Ana that became Faces of Mankind. From designing cars at Kia to painting portraits on the streets, and now large-scale murals, Brian has turned art into a tool of connection, dignity, and justice. We'll talk today about how a single portrait started a movement, how murals in public art can heal, and how visible love can change what home actually means. Brian, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Scott. It's wonderful to connect with you again.
You know, as we start our conversation, you're actually at the Miami Rescue Mission and painting, and I pulled you from your work, and we're going to come back to that and talk about what you're actually doing. But I want to go back to when you and I first met about 10 years ago at a restaurant in Tustin, California, after a HomeAid Orange County board member told me, Scott, you've got to meet this young car designer from Kia. He's got a passion for helping the homeless. And Brian, honestly, I hear that a fair amount, in people in our position. I want to help and I want to do something. And I was a little skeptical at first when you and I first met and sat down. But as I heard your heart and your passion and what you were looking to do, I am so grateful that we had that conversation that day and the journey that we've been on and that you've gone on since. And 10 years ago, you and your wife, Vanessa, were moved to Santa Ana and had a burning desire to love your neighbors unconditionally and sacrificially. Take us back to that moment when you moved to Santa Ana and what you saw and how you became a portrait painter of people living on the streets and experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, it's wild to think that was 10 years ago. Got a lot of gray hair since then, a couple children. But taking you back 10 years, I picked up a book called Love Does. And this book is by Bob Goff. And it's actually about how do you make love an action? What if love wasn't just something you said, but something you did? And I'm reading about loving others around me, loving your coworkers, loving your family, loving your neighbor. And I hear these screams one night from my neighbor outside of my downtown Santa Ana apartment. And I'd heard those screams before. If I'm honest, I actually used to call him in my household, oh, there goes the screaming homeless man again. Like, there goes our good night's rest. It pains me to say that today, but this day I'm reading about loving my neighbor. I hear his screams, and the thought in my heart was that, man, his screams went into my soul, and I'm just like, I don't even know this guy's name. If he's my neighbor, I've never even said hello. And I told my wife I'm going to go find him. And I think 2 days later, after leaving work one day, I actually rode my bike to work on this day. I just got that nudge in my spirit to go look for this man who was always screaming outside of my building. And I found him a block away from where I lived, sat down with him, introduced myself. And the first thing I did was apologize to him. I said, hey, man, my name's Brian, and I'm sorry, but I've driven by you 100 times and never stopped to say hello. And so here's my hello to you. And his name was Matthew. He told me a little bit about his life. And in the midst of that conversation, this is where I feel like something supernatural happened. As he was telling me his story, and you got to understand, this man had like the most overgrown beard you can imagine. His fingernails were probably like 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. Probably hadn't showered in months, but on his face and his story, like in my heart, I started to see beauty in it. I'm like, wow, like this is a real person that I've driven by 100 times. And so out of the depths of my belly, I just said, hey, Matthew, would you be okay if I painted a portrait of you? And I was shocked that I said it. He was shocked that I said it. So both of us in our shockedness, he said, yeah, sure. Like, what do you want to do? I said, man, I'll just take a picture of you and I'll go home and start painting. And I hadn't painted in like 10 years. I was working as an automotive designer, as you mentioned. And Matthew's story was the thing that got me back into my gift that I know now is my form of worship. And that first man, that first meeting was the start of Faces of Santa Ana, where one man screaming captured my heart.
You just mentioned uh, as an act of worship. What a beautiful thing that is. And going back to something that you hadn't done for 10 years and how it revived something that was in your soul. Yeah, that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful. On your website, you talk about that when your motives shifted from just trying to help the homeless to actually simply loving the homeless. And expand on that a little bit more from either something from the book or what you saw in Matthew's life, and maybe even what Vanessa saw in your life.
Yeah, like a lot of it is like you start to put pieces together. Like your life ends up being sort of a puzzle, and you can look back and see where pieces were being put together. But I know now that, like, okay, my art is worship, and I can use that to love people. But at the time, the way I sort of stumbled upon that idea, that quote that's on my website, is I kept getting hurt by having expectations of, okay, I painted this guy, now will he change? I painted this woman, will she get off the streets, you know? And it was unhealthy, and I started to realize, like, oh, I have some like weird stuff in my heart. Like, what if I just become a friend, right? And whether they change or not, doesn't matter, you know? That happened in me because one person actually passed away who I had painted and become friends with. And there was no change before this man passed away. But I took a step back and thought, like, man, I might have been his only friend. He lost his life on the streets, but I think at the end of the day, he knew he had one friend that just loved him unconditionally. And so that became my motive. I was like, I need to shift the way I think about this so that I can be healthy in the process and I can give real, true, authentic love. And I'm not saying change is bad. I think changing's good, but I didn't want to use that as a metric to my friendship.
In looking at other things that you have on your website, you talk about envisioning a world where every person is visible. So many people on the street are not, and that people are connected and that they're loved, and that you seem to make it a priority, or at least, when those paintings to listen and to tell their story and establish trust. Were those values in you, or was that accentuated, those values of listening to a story and establishing trust, or did that come out as you painted people and you learned their story and you put basically pen to paper, brush to canvas?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people don't know this, but to get to that mission statement of like to make sure people feel visible, connected, and loved took me a long time. You know, because my organization was doing a lot of things. It was painting portraits. There was a lot of facets to it, but that was like what I could distill everything down to. Like, what's the common denominator? And it was actually painting Matthew's portrait because he told me his story. And I realized that as I stood in front of this first painting ever of a man experiencing homelessness in my neighborhood, as I'm painting, I started to realize that his story was running through my mind. Like, I started to sort of feel his pain. I started to understand his struggles. And his story was the thing that was motivating me as an artist to actually paint this piece, right? And so I think that's what became so crucial to me when I sat down with somebody new to learn their story. Because I'm like, okay, I really want to feel connected to this art. I want to feel connected to you as a person. So tell me about yourself. And I would ask all kind of questions. Some of the most important things I think I would ask people often is like, what's your happiest moment? And it's funny, a lot of people in the streets, that was a tough question for them. Many people said, I don't know, I haven't had one. The other question I would ask is, what's your saddest moment? Like, what's your saddest moment? We've all had sad moments in our lives. And that question, it was often hard to hear the answers to. And as you got to know people more, you know, once I painted them and we were in relationship for many years, you start to hear deeper levels of their saddest moments, right? And you start to realize that, man, sometimes friendship is just listening. Like, I didn't have the answers to all their problems or their sadness, but I was an ear to listen to. And I realized in the beginning that this ear to listen to someone was actually the fuel for the painting. Like, if I didn't know their story, I couldn't possibly paint them.
And then as you got to know their story, it was as if you weren't expecting anything from them. You weren't expecting change, and they weren't expecting something from you. I mean, it was a friendship that developed. But one of the things that did come out of this in those early days was the love account, and where you would paint this portrait and you would look to sell. And some you sold, others you didn't. But the proceeds went directly into an account to help that individual, and you would ask person, how can we help you with these proceeds? And can you share any examples of what transactions took place and what the love account changed in somebody's life and how that stayed with you?
Yeah, I will share my favorite love account story, but before that, I just want to say that and this was not an idea that I had of like, oh, why don't I like put A, B, and C together and make a love account? It was actually I just posted a couple paintings online and people were like, oh, are these for sale? I'd love to buy them. And so I couldn't fathom why anybody would want to buy a portrait of someone who's living in my neighborhood. But then I was like, oh, well, if I sell this, I could use the money to help them, right? So it was just like it just came from the heart. It was all circumstantial. There was no business model put together. But I want to tell a story about a friend of mine. Her name is Kimberly. And Kimberly she was one of the leaders in Santa Ana Civic Center for all kinds of reasons, but everybody knew her. And when Kimberly's painting sold, one of the things that she asked me to do, she said, my daughter is behind on her rent.
Mm,
She said, I've never been able to help my daughter as long as I've been out here. She'd been on the streets for like 20 years or something. And so she's like, this is going to be the first time in my life that I'm going to be able to help my daughter. So she said, can you write a check? And she met me at her daughter's apartment. We both walked into the apartment. I gave the envelope to her. She gave it to her daughter. Her daughter opened it and just tears flowed down her eyes. Her daughter looked at me and said, this is the first time my mother has ever been able to help me with anything financial in my entire life. And I'm standing there thinking like, man, this one painting, this one act of love, this one act of worship is healing the wounds inside of a mother-daughter relationship. I could have never imagined that would happen. I could never write that story down and make something like that up. But I wish everyone can be in the room with me as the artist to see the impact of what your art can do for someone's life. And I have 1,000 love account stories, but that one
yeah.
is like my favorite.
And that has such depth to it. You're right, the mother-daughter piece. And I use the word redemption. There was aspects that your art and these funds helped to redeem a relationship, whether or not it was for that moment or long term. There was a connection, and then there was a tangible outcome of helping her daughter pay the rent. You're right. You cannot write a script like that. I mean, somebody in Hollywood may, but that happened in real life. And that happened because you stepped into a space that you were vulnerable and you let it just happen. It's absolutely beautiful. As I think of those early days, because I remember seeing those portraits and seeing your work, it it transitioned into opportunities for you to do large scale murals. And where your site, again, pointing back to your website, says, our hope is that we spread our movement to walls, use the word walls, around the world with the radical message of love, hope, and positive affirmations. How do you think that a mural, other than just an individual portrait, what can it do that an individual portrait can't?
Yeah, so I love these questions, Scott. I deeply believe in my heart that art is supernatural. What I mean by that is like what the artist puts in is often what people receive when they experience your arts. And like we said in the beginning, my art is worship. And so I go out to every wall now with a revelation in my heart that, God gave us pigments of the earth. He gave us the colors, and I'm just giving it back to him, right? And so in many ways, I've had people come up to me mid-mural in tears. Thank you for beautifying my neighborhood. I've lived here for so many years, and you have no idea how much this is bringing joy and life to my community. The interesting thing about a lot of my murals is like I get sent into dark places. I get sent into
Yeah.
areas where a lot of other people aren't investing in. And so imagine taking an art gallery and putting it outside for people that might never step foot in a gallery. right? And so the joy of being a public artist is you get to put that intangible thing, because I feel like art impacts the intangible places of our hearts. You get to put that in front of people every single day on their way to work, on their way to school. If you guys could just see how children react to a mural. Children light up when they see a 5-story tall mural. It's like an instant form of joy. And so when you go to my website, you'll see that I use a ton of color. I probably have like the
Yes.
brightest murals that you've ever seen. And that's purposeful. That's done with intention to show people that that art can affect your psyche, art can affect your mood and emotions, and it can really be inspirational. And so we've been seeing that over the last couple of years, that it truly is supernatural if you let it be.
Yeah, and the work of HomeAid, and as we work on buildings and what we call the built environment, I, your art has been incorporated into some of those, but I truly believe that the built environment is part of the healing process. The beautification, and it's not just plants, it's design, it's understanding trauma informed design. There's so many different components that come into the built environment to heal a person's body, their mind, their soul. Some of the earliest murals that I remember that you worked on, specifically the Orchard, which was a permanent supportive housing project in Santa Ana for Mercy House. One of the ones that I love as well is you did a living room on a wall at a church in Costa Mesa where you could do a selfie, people could go up to it and take their pictures, kind of group pictures. And then you even painted a mural for HomeAid Orange County at the Yale Street Emergency Shelter. Is there any of those early murals that really stood out to you, that impacted you and kind of shifted your thoughts on design and the message and how the community responded?
Yeah, in a big way, and I'd have to give credit to the Orchard mural for a few reasons. The first reason is that was my first mural. Um, a lot of people don't know this, but when the team, CDP, who was building the orchard, they reached out to me. They said, "Hey, we saw some news articles about the portraits you paint of your neighbors experiencing homelessness, and we have this 200-foot wall in the back of our building." And they asked me, they said, "Do you paint murals?" And so I lied and I said yes. And up until that point, I'd never driven a lift, never held a spray can. I knew nothing about painting murals, but I just said yes. I said yes for a few reasons, but the main reason is that a lady spoke to me at an event one day and she said, "I see you painting murals around the world." And she sat me down for like 5 minutes and prophesied over my life about how one mural is going to turn to two, two to three, four to 10. And so when that job opportunity opened, I knew I had to say yes to it. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of people on that wall. It ended up being the faces of the people that were being like rescued from the streets going into these units. We did interviews and painted their faces on their building. And the interesting thing about it is most people asked me, they were trying to figure out who the celebrities were on the mural. So they spent, oh, who is this? It's like, they're trying to figure out, are these people, I feel like it's someone I know. And when I told them, actually, it's the people we drive by every day and don't know. Right. And so it did a really interesting thing in people's hearts that like, oh, wait, homelessness can be beautiful, right? Like that the elephant in the room, the thing that we kind of ignore and don't want to talk about could be made beautiful, and I can see it with different eyes. And so so for that, because that mural did that for a lot of people, I'd got to give the Orchard one of the like one of the more impactful murals that I've done. There was also a little like a 9-year-old kid on the wall, and he had just come off the streets with his mom, and he's on the wall with his like PlayStation controller and all the things that he loves. And so imagine like this 9, 10-year-old kid looking at himself 30 feet tall, his big old face, and he's just like, "Man, I feel seen," right? And I
Right.
remember asking him, I said, "Man, how do you feel on a scale of like 1 to 10, just looking at yourself?" And he goes, "Man, this is an 11." He's like, "I've never imagined I'd see myself on the side of my home," right? So
Yeah, and definitely taking the unseen to be seen, and the fact that what celebrities are there? And it's just like,
yeah.
those are your neighbors. That is absolutely fantastic. And those simple beginnings have just blossomed. You changed from Santa Ana to Faces of Mankind, and really looking to evolve and engaging other artists potentially across the nation and even abroad. Have you seen that take place where your vision of expanding and engaging others because you're just an individual and have you seen it encourage and empower others to do similar work either in this country or around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that happened during COVID, which I don't think is a coincidence. A lot of artists were reaching out to me and like, "Hey, I've seen what you're doing. I'm working from home now, right? And I have a lot of time on my hands." And so, COVID was either good or bad for a lot of different reasons, but this one in particular, I think you had a lot of creatives sitting at home wondering what to do with these idle hands, right? And so a
Exactly.
lot of people started reaching out to me, and I sort of would jump on Zoom calls with them and be like, "Hey, man, like, let's get you started. What do you need? Do you want me to send you some paint, some canvases?"
Yeah.
And so in that process of Faces of Detroit, Faces of Riverside, Faces of Jackson, Tennessee, and so like it just artists started saying like, I want to jump in. I want to take a risk. I want to put myself in a situation that is uncomfortable because I typically don't talk to strangers, right? And all the things that I learned in the process, the icky areas of judgment in our hearts, the areas where I've had to like apologize for being wrong. It was like these artists sort of like walked in the same path. And the idea of just meeting and learning someone's story and becoming friends with someone who's not like you, it's actually a life-changing experience for the artist. I know a lot of the attention is like, man, you're helping change the hearts of the person living on the streets. But I'm willing to say I was changed more than them in the process. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's like the secret sauce. that's
it,
that's
it,
the
it, it
unspoken
really
thing
is
is like get ready for you to change, right?
for you to change.
Yeah,
Exactly. And now that you're partnering with nonprofits and cities and even corporations now have looked at your model and what you're doing, and you're really helping to scale, whether or not they know it or not. It's scaling that vision and that blessing that was placed on you. Is there any advice that you want to give to others that might be listening to connect art with impact? Anything that you would share?
had an interesting like I think there's moments in your life where like you think you know what you're doing and then like boom, you get humbled and think you know what you're doing and you get humbled.
Every
And
day?
yeah, right. And so I want to share a story of a friend of mine. His name is Sean. He reached out to me and he's like, man, you're a great painter. You're incredible at what you do. But he said to me, he said, I don't know if you realize this, but what you're really good at, and he's like, this is what I'm not so good at, is he's like, I've watched you sit down and talk to people on the streets. And he's like, I've seen you walk up to someone cold, sit on the ground next to them, break the ice, and have a conversation where they just open up and tell you their whole life. And he's telling me, he's like, that's not normal. And I'm like, oh. So I didn't even realize that that like superpower that I've been blessed with, I guess, is what has given me access to paint people and learn their stories and do all kind of things in life. And so he told me, he's just like, teach me how to do that. Because if I can learn how to be that person, he's like, I can go do whatever I want to do because I'm connecting with humans, right? And as you mentioned before about the different artists jumping on board, painting portraits as well. Most of the questions they would ask me were in relation to that. None of them were asking me how to paint. They were like, how do you handle this situation in conversations, you know? And so any advice that I'd give to somebody in light of what I just said is at some point you come to a realization that like life is about people. I don't care if you're an artist, a CEO, an accountant, whatever you're doing, life is about people. And so what would it be like if we aimed to like master relationships so that you can sit down on the sidewalk next to someone and have a phenomenal conversation, or you can sit in a boardroom in the penthouse of a downtown area talking to a CEO and have an incredible conversation. And so my advice was to be like, whatever you're doing, try to master relationships with people. Be genuine, be authentic. That's the secret is like authenticity. If you're this is great. People would ask me, what do I do if I'm scared to walk up to somebody and say hello? My answer is always the same. Tell them that. walk up to them and say, hey, if I'm a little honest, I don't talk to people much. I walk past strangers. I'm a little nervous to come up to you right now, but there's like this burning desire in my heart to just say hello. So just tell them the truth, right? And so moving in like authenticity, I think is always what sort of opens the gates to like healthy relationships.
Do you feel that that's been probably the anchor in your personal growth through this? Is that aspect of just what you shared is if you would say, this is the one area where I've really grown, would that be it?
I think so. And I think that's like, I don't think there's an area, I don't think this topic is something that you master and you're like, I've got it. I think it's like a forever, it'll forever grow. You can always be better at it, right? And so I think the reason I am where I am as a full-time artist today, as a husband, as a father, is a lot to do with just relational work, relational improvements, you know?
Yeah, it's step by step. So you and Vanessa are now back in Miami, raising your family, but your work continues. I mean, I've seen some of your recent work in Southern California, and not visually but online in Long Beach. You've done some work honoring Kobe Bryant, to other new mural projects. How do you see the future? You're looking back in the last 10 years, there's been growth and opportunities. What do you see next? What do you see? Because your work is being obviously seen and acknowledged in communities around the country. What do you see moving forward?
If I'm honest, my mind is blown with how God's opened up doors for me. Sometimes I ask myself, why me? Like, how did I get here? But I think what I see, what I'm after, where I feel like things are going is I'm first understanding that my role of why I exist on earth is to make art that's public, whether that's a portrait on canvas or a building. I see myself doing sculptures in the future, and interpreting things in people's lives and making it in a 3D form. I'm sort of dabbling in that now. But the main thing is I just want my kids to pick up on what their dad's doing, right? If I know there's a lot of like worldly success I can achieve, but the best thing for me is if my kids can grab hold of something and say like, man, I watched my dad do something that maybe other dads weren't doing, right? I watched my dad give himself to the public square to love people, to worship with his gift. I watched my dad understand that he was given a gift that was meant to be given back to humanity. That would be the ultimate success if my kids can lay hold of that and say, "This is how I want to live."
Wow, that really is. And some may have thought that an aspirational goal was designing the interior of a car for Kia. And look where you're at now. This is I'm just blown away. The today we mentioned at the beginning of the time you're painting at the Miami Rescue Mission. What are you painting today? What did I pull you away from there at the Miami Rescue Mission?
Scott, if you can only see the lower half of me right now, I have like paint all over my pants. um, Before I tell you what I'm painting, I want to tell you where I'm painting. In Miami, if anyone's been to Miami, there's a city called Wynwood. It's a city that development is booming right now. Years ago, a developer brought in artists to start painting walls. So now, in a lot of ways, Wynwood is almost like the mural capital of the world. There's art everywhere. Um, in my humble opinion, a lot of it is not uplifting. A lot of it is not joyful. A lot of it is not the thing that lights your spirit on fire. And so I'm here at the Miami Rescue Mission, which is in the heart of Wynwood, right downtown. They've been serving our neighbors experiencing homelessness for many, 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 many years. And I'm painting a 4-story tall image of a man praying. It's like a side view of a man praying, and he's facing another gentleman who's walking up like a giant staircase with a graduation cap and gown on.
Mm,
And this mission here, they run their men through a program where they teach them life skills again. They get them free from any addictions. They do career and job training, and they literally have a graduation every year where like 50 or so men and women will graduate from their program. And they get to wear a cap and gown. They get to walk across a stage. And it's a moment for them that they'll never forget. They didn't have an opportunity often to graduate in their own lives, and they're graduating into life, right? And so this mural is a sort of depiction of the men and women behind the scenes praying that they would reach that goal, and then the idea of your journey really begins now as you walk up this staircase back out into the world to be a light. And so we're putting something in Wynwood that really doesn't exist here. There are no
Mm,
murals with this kind of subject matter or heart. And so we're hoping that it really blesses the community in a big way.
I know that it will, because I've seen your work, and others hopefully will as well. So as we look to wrap up our time, because I want to get you back out there, and you can put your other shirt on. Not, it'd be great to see what shirt you were wearing as you were
Right.
painting, but you changed for our time. But there it is.
My construction cert.
You instructed. What what's one thing that a listener could do today to see and love their neighbor
To a
differently?
listener who's listening right now, I know this to be true, that your biggest breakthrough is on the other side of your greatest fears. I was terrified to talk to Matthew. I walked up to him, sweaty palms, butterflies in the stomach, every voice inside my head telling me not to go. Every logical carnal thought saying, don't talk to this man. He could be dangerous. He could be this. He could be that, right? And so if I wouldn't have broke through that barrier of fear, now I wouldn't be on this podcast talking to you right now. And so think about the things that scare you. Walk through life like a child, just seeing everything as an opportunity to play in this place called Earth. And if for a moment you want to do something and fear holds you back, that might be the thing you should run after. And I promise you there'll be a breakthrough on the other side of that.
Wow. Well, Brian, I'm truly grateful that Eric from HomeAid Orange County said I needed to meet you. And you've touched my heart then and today. Your art, your love, your reminder that creativity can be a radical act of connection. To our listeners out there, if Brian's story moved you as it's moved me, I encourage you to look at Brian's work. Take a look at his websites, the portraits that he's done, the murals that he's currently doing, and consider how you can paint your neighbor's dignity, whether or not it's with a brush, your time, or your presence. This has been Unsheltered Conversations. I'm Scott Larson. Thank you for listening, and keep sharing dignity and love that's at the center of change.